Real-time collaborative editing is my topic. I want to walk through this topic with you together uh, based on this agenda. So first of all, we will see what exactly real-time collaborative editing means and why it may be a good idea to have it. Then we will check, what attempts have been in the past using MediaWiki for towards this goal. And then we'll have a look out at the challenges and use cases that not just we faced, but also that challenges that the MediaWiki developers, the Wikipedia projects faced with this kind of technology. The use cases, by the way, is more like how we plan or how we think collaborative editing can be used. And we will end this with a quick showcase, or a quick session where we demonstrate how it works currently. This is a very early alpha version of the software, so it's very likely that things change. But I think it's already pretty cool to show, and yeah, that's why I want to share it with you. So let's start. So what does it even mean to work collaboratively on a document in real time? Some of you, or maybe even most of you, already know this from other software. I think one of the most prominent examples is Google Docs, but you might have also seen it in Microsoft Office, especially in the online applications. But there are also other tools like the EasyPad technology or so-called Collabora Online, which features such functionality. What does it mean? It allows you to join edit sessions with other users from remote locations. So you don't need to share the same computer. You don't need to be in the same room, but you can still work at the same time on the same document. This means that you can see the changes in real time that are applied by other users, and so they can see your changes too. So the document is edited from multiple users simultaneously in the same time. This is why would you do that? Well, it fits very well in our modern world of working, where people more and more work from home or in general remote. We have plenty of businesses where international teams are a pretty common thing, where people are not within the same office or even the same city or country, where people where this is their daily life to just communicate completely through the internet using the computer and screen sharings and whatever. And within this world, it's very it fits very, very well to work on one document all at the same time. You get into the you have the ability to directly interact with what the respective other has created, and you can fix typos on the fly. You can add items to lists of stuff like this, and this is especially useful if you're discussing a topic, if you're brainstorming, or if you're trying to draft a document that can then later be used. And obviously, it is also a lot of fun, because interacting with other people is always some kind of fun. And this is really a nice technology, which I personally found very, very interesting, and I enjoy working with that. So this brings us to a quick overview of what has been tried in the past, and how things developed. So the idea of working collaboratively on a document is not new. Speaking of Etherpad, for example, this was, I think, even way before 2010. There were technologies around that supported collaborative editing, which were back then, they were very, very simple text editors, for example. And as wiki text itself is basically just text, that the idea of collaborating or real-time collaboration on wikis was already in 2011. Was we can find the first traces there. It's not a surprise that this happens together with the initial work of Visual Editor. So when the Wikimedia Foundation started to work with Visual Editor, it got clear quickly that this technology can be used to enable collaborative editing. But they weren't that far yet. So basically, it was still just a discussion and an idea, and it took quite some time. First, people started out with technologies that were available already at that time. Which is namely Etherpad. So they started to integrate Etherpad into MediaWiki and to allow people to collaborate using the Etherpad tool, which was a nice idea, but it lacked integration. So basically, it was just a text editor that you could write wiki text in it and then copy it to some page, which is not particularly user-friendly. Some time later, they tried a different technology, so-called Together.js, which is something from the Mozilla Foundation, so the vendors of the famous browser. They brought up the Together.js tool, which was tried out in using a MediaWiki gadget and evaluated, but eventually this was dropped also. Around 2017, this was with MediaWiki 130, the first actual implementation of the so-called ColabPad or WE ColabPad, as you can see it here, appeared. It went never into production. It was just it was bundled with the extension, with the Visual Editor. It was delivered, but it was never really activated. It was for, let's say, internal evaluation and testing. It was used in the Wikimedia Foundation a little bit, but not to a larger extent. And it also was never adopted in any way to the Wikipedia. We will talk about the reasons for that in a minute. Once ColorPad was available, they actually invested quite some work into that throughout the years 2017 and 18 and a little bit in 19. But since then, the work declined, and the code is still maintained to some degree. So they are applying compatibility fixes and stuff like that. But there's currently no active project that deals with developing things further. And the reason for that is what we see here on the challenges page. When working on the wiki, there is some important things to be considered. One thing is every edit that you do in the wiki is always assigned to is associated with a timestamp. That's obvious, the time when the save button was hit, and with a user, obviously the person that clicked the save button. But that's a problem when you use collaborative editing, real-time collaborative editing, because if multiple people join together for creating content, then several questions arise. For example, who contributed which part of the text? So let's have a quick look here in the middle. where we have this stylized text. You can see the various users and different colors. All of them contributed different parts of the text. So if we save this now, how can we know who contributed which part? Now, in the Wikipedia world, this is very important. They are very very strict with naming who changed which part of the content. That's just what they want to have in an encyclopedia, and that's important to them. So this was a very big problem. The first two questions, by the way, are pretty close connected, because if you cannot tell which person contributed which part, there's also the question who is responsible, who owns the final work. So if you cannot separate those things, and when you save, then it's only one person basically that is actually assigned, actually recorded as an author. And that's a big question. Who owns the final work then? Also a big topic in the Wikipedia world. Yeah, and then again, who is in control of saving a page? So is there an owner of a session, or can everybody save at any time, and so on? So there are quite some questions. Always keep in mind that in the end, we're just editing wiki text. So unlike other technologies that I have already mentioned, like Collabora or Google Docs, we do not have a very sophisticated data storage. So for example, in the Google Docs, you can actually store the information who typed which characters. The Google Docs format is capable of doing this. They can tell that this particular paragraph has been edited by this particular person. Wikitext cannot do that. Wikitext is a plain text format, and it's a good format. It has some clear advantages. For example, that it can easily be compared. For example, and it is actually human readable. For example, if you actually look into the contents of a Google Docs document, you wouldn't be able to read anything in there because it's just a huge mess of metadata. You can still obviously extract the information, and a machine can very well work with that, but a human can not very well deal with that kind of content unless it is in a particular editor interface or view interface. And there are some additional challenges to this. So besides just the question of attribution, who did it, when, there is also the question about how can we deal with undetected changes. So what are undetected changes? Well, in the first place, it looks pretty straightforward, right? You start a collaborative session, people join into the session, and you write together. That's cool. But imagine if you have a larger document that spans over several pages, over several screen pages. You cannot really see if somebody changed something outside of your viewport. So if you have scrolled, let's say, to the bottom of the page because you're currently editing the bottom of the page, somebody of your co-authors could easily change something in the upper part of the document, which would go through more or less unseen by you. Obviously, you can always see this in the comparison afterwards in the difference view, but during the session, it's quite difficult to see it. And last but not least, how to deal with edit conflicts. So the problem is that the current implementation, at least of the WE Colapad, is not an actual edit mode of the wiki, but it lives, let's say, in a parallel world. It's a special page where you can edit stuff, and then afterwards you just export it. But you can never be really sure if the page that you have imported for editing hasn't changed in the meantime. So basically, you have been working on an outdated state of the page. Now, if you're going to import back stuff, then you might override other changes, and there's no clear way for conflict resolution in this case. By the way, just for information, the last so that the three graphics down here, they should just illustrate how this basically works. The first one basically shows the various cursors. This is what you're going to see in the demo also. The second one just shows that people are able to edit various parts of the page. And the last one, that's an interesting one. That one deals with the attribution, was the question, who is responsible, who added who owns some changes. And you might have recognized this as a history view of a page. You see the radio buttons where you can select various versions and stuff and so on. And as you know, the history page or wiki page only features one column basically for the user. And yeah, I've visualized this that way, that there's just one main user that is actually that's the person that clicked the save button in the end, while the other ones that were still part of the edit session, well, currently, or in the original implementation of the Wikimedia color pad extension, this information was lost completely, basically. And now what you see here is already an idea about how to solve this in the project that we are currently implementing. So by basically just giving a co-author information in the same row, just telling, okay, hey, this edit was not exclusively made by this particular person, but maybe it may have been a joint work together with other peoples. That's just an example. As wiki text is just a simple plain text, we can still not identify the various parts clearly, which have changed. Oh, better, we can identify the parts, but we cannot tell who actually changed them. Now let's move on, and let's have a look at the last item here. It says how to deal with edit conflicts. Actually, when we thought about how we could use this collaborative editing, or if we could use it actually, we came up with a couple of ideas. So one of them is that the edit conflict issue may even be solved by collaborative editing in general. Because if you think about it, when does an edit conflict actually happen? An edit conflict happens if you start an edit session and somebody else also starts an edit session in parallel on his client. And then this other person saves first. Then your change has been based on an outdated version, which leads to an edit conflict. That's resolving edit conflicts is always an odd thing to do. And actually, using real-time collaborative editing could even prevent that. If we make it if we make the collaborative editing some kind of a standard way of editing the page. So basically, there wouldn't even be the chance that somebody edits the page in a different way, but they wouldn't. If you had a session running, an edit session running, well, then people would just join your session, or would need to ask you if they can join, and therefore edit conflicts would not even be possible. That's a really nice use case about that technology. The other thing is, creating meeting minutes. So when would you even use such a technology? Well, creating meeting minutes is a very good example for that. In many cases, people sit together in a meeting and everybody takes notes on their various devices, on tablets, on paper, on whatever medium they prefer. And then in the end, somebody maybe writes some minutes, and other people need to join in and to correct the minutes or sign the minutes or whatever. And having meeting minutes in the wiki is not an uncommon thing. Actually, it's pretty wide used. And with this technology, you could much more efficiently create your meeting minutes. You could join together, you could modify things, and then you get a much quicker, you get a good result for the meeting minutes. Another use case would be the drafting sessions or brainstorming. Basically, when you say, okay, we need some kind of a document, not necessarily minutes, but an actual document. But how do we start? How can we go on? And that's also a very good use case for this technology. So you could have sessions remote or even together in one room, or everybody with his computer in front of him, and then people can start during they discuss. They can start working on the document. That's a nice thing. The other topics, by the way, that I have just talked about, like who contributed what, who owns the final work, who's in control of serving, especially the question of contribution. Well, they are still present, even in our approaches, but it's a question of whether they are this important to the business user. Like, it's not a scientific work, and while there are obviously responsibilities in a business, well, we still have other tools like approval, for example, to make sure that the content of a page is actually good. In the business world, it's more like we want to work efficiently, we want to work quickly, we want to share knowledge and make sure that everything is documented. That's what brought us to the insight that it is worth trying. That it's worth going that way and seeing how can we integrate this well in our product, because we think that the benefits of having such a collaborative tool outweighed the problems that we might have here. They still are there, and some of them cannot be solved completely. We can maybe, find workarounds like this proposed co-author information in the history, but some of them are technically not solvable. But again, I think the idea of having, or the possibility of having such a way to collaborate is way too mighty, way too interesting to let it be blocked by such things. Yeah, so those were the use cases already. And now let's quickly move on to a demo. So I have prepared a page already. Let's quickly reload that just to make sure. And here, what you can see here is this is the same page in our test system, in this case 4.4 test system. But I'm logged in with two different users. I'm logged in with my my own user account, and I'm logged in with some arbitrary test user account. So these are two different users. And if I'm clicking on the edit button, I would currently I would still go just into the regular edit mode. But if I'm using the drop down here, you can see there's a new entry. It's called Edit Collaboratively. Again, an idea would be to actually make this the main action, but for now it's still in here. So if I start Edit Collaboratively, it will start the visual editor. You see, it looks pretty similar to the regular visual editor. There's no big difference. You might have seen that little toast notification up there that said our Vogel joined the session. That's just a notification, so I actually see that something happens. And besides that, it's a regular visual editor. There are some differences. So for example, I have a user information here, so I can say, okay, I am Rad, for example. And there's also a link for yeah, for sharing, basically. If I can now go to, and I can now click that link, and I can send it to Verena, for example, and ask her to join. And if she clicks this link, she will automatically enter this this session. Let's see how this works from the other side. So let's assume I'm here on the other user. I'm on the same page, and if I'm now going to if I now want to edit, I only can edit collaboratively. I cannot even start a regular edit session here, because that would maybe cause an edit conflict. But I can join this session, and here you can see now there's some information. It says some user has joined the session. Here's it's also, well, I'm listed in addition. So yeah, people are notified whenever somebody joins in the session or leaves it. Again, I can choose my coloring, and then that's it basically. And I can go and start typing, and you can see when I'm typing on the right side here, it's directly and in real time is reflected on the left side, which is my session. And if I do changes here, this also gets directly reflected on the other session. So we can now collaborate. We can even let's say do some uploads here. So I have just uploaded the file, let's say into it, and you can see it here. On the other hand, on the other side too, I can go ahead and modify this a little bit. Scroll down. So can change the sizes or something like that, and it will be mirrored directly into the other system. And yeah, that's basically all the trick and all the functionality currently. So yeah, and here, by the way, we can see Verena has just joined me. So she's appearing here, and she can also do her edits. So our goal is to integrate as much as possible. So the plan is to feature everything that you would know from the regular visual editor, and allow it also on the Colab pad. Today's state is that it is pretty good already. So most things are already working, and there will still be some additional things to be done. So for example, currently we need to choose the colors manually. This is probably something that we're going to make a preference, for example, for the users, and so on. And also we are currently experimenting with the question how sessions can be started or should be started, and how they can be ended properly. So for example, is it sufficient if one person clicks the save button? Can everybody click the save button, or only the initiator? Such things. These are things that we're currently evaluating. These are things that we are currently trying out in implementation. And yeah, that's the current state. So I can also show, if I'm now going to save this, you see, okay, it gives me a hint that if I save this page, I will actually end the session. We will now see this on the right screen here. If I'm saving, I can see, okay, it has been saved to the page, and this screen just tells me, okay, this, obviously the message is not perfect yet, but it tells me that the session was closed. So it tells me somebody has ended the session, but everything has been persisted, everything is in the wiki, and that's it. So yeah, that was a quick demo of the current state. And I think, yeah, that's it so far.
So thank you for your talk and the demonstration. We have questions. So the question arose if there's auto saving, I think.
Yeah, autosaving. Well, no. Also, let's put it that way. Yes and no. So theoretically, you can leave the session open. I have now ended the session by saving the dialog, but you could just leave the session. You could just close the browser. You can, yeah, if your computer breaks or something, the session will still be open, so you can join in later. But that's not necessarily autosaving, especially as we usually do not do autosaving at all, because saving um, in the wiki always means to create a new revision. And with the revision, there goes a username, there goes a timestamp, and stuff like that. We thought about that, if we could have a save button that just triggers a save to the revision, and or maybe even persisted from time to time. But that doesn't really seem to be a good idea. The good news is the session will persist. So if you drop out a session, you can just join in and nothing will be lost. That's kind of a side autosaving. But in the end, when the session gets closed, we need to actually save it into the wiki to have a regular revision, because as long as it is just lives in the session of the editing, it is not available to anything, right? It's not search indexed, for example. You cannot print it, you cannot export it, stuff like that. Yeah, and therefore, in the end, we need to have a saving. Yeah, there's a question about what if the first author leaves the page. Well, it depends. Again, we are a little bit experimenting here. So one idea would be to just pass on the ownership, basically, to the next one that was on the page. Or, well, we would just leave it open. If we leave the session open, well, basically the question is, who can then save?
Yeah.
Can everybody save? Can it only be the initiator, and so on? Yeah. Let's see, what else do we have here? Auto saving, and the initiator has to accept the latest version. Yeah, well, we need to be careful here a little bit. Accept, or the word accept here, is about, I think it's about approval. It's so accepting or approving a version in the wiki is a concept that can be done, but I still don't think that auto saving to the wiki itself is a very good idea, because it will somehow fragmentize your version history. So let's imagine you have a automatically save every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds. Then you get an actual entry in the revision history for every 30 seconds. This can be done. But if you then want to see let's say, what have we actually changed between when we started and when we ended, you will need to span all the revisions and say, okay, this is the one that we ended and this is the one that we started on, and now let's compare those two. It's not that easy anymore and it's not yeah, we need to experiment with the user experience here. And by the way, you don't need to apologize for the question. It's perfect. That's, yeah.
Well, I think we can see it is work in progress. So this is a concept, and there are still questions and open topics and things that perhaps need another solution.
But I'm really happy for any input here. So you see, we are working on that. We're discussing it internally, and it's always good to have another opinion on that, or other ideas that we might not have considered yet. That's
right.
Hi, I will just join a bit because that touches product development and also from the, let's say, from the commercial side, not only. And yeah, I have some remarks for that, but maybe we just go through the questions first. And so
Well, there is still one remark, and that's that it should be differentiated, the live versions and the real wiki versions.
Yeah, that could actually be done. Of course, we could not store that into the actual revision table, but we could set up another table basically that holds such autosaves. That's totally true. Temporary table, or just a table that that gets cleared when you click save. Basically, when we end the session, we could just remove all the autosaves, throw them away, and that's it. That's probably possible. The question is if it is actually required, because as I said, if we do not close the session, it will just stay open with the edit with the edit thing that we did. It is some kind of an autosave, so you could at any time leave the session, and if you leave it open, if you don't close it explicitly, you can come back later. You can go to a different device basically and just resume the session here. That's the idea. Yeah.